Hello, I want to talk about the Diana statue. Before we go any further, I want you to know I think it's dreadful. It's truly awful. I'm not prevaricating, I'm not beating around the bush, it's terrible. I don't suppose I should be surprised that I haven't yet seen much in the way of criticism about it, because I've left this for a couple of days myself. It's difficult to take a shot at something like this because I'm sure there are many who feel bad about saying what they think because they don't want to cause more pain. But in the end, I decided it just has to be said. The statue is pretty much total crap. Sorry. I saw the video of it being unveiled. What a disappointment that was. Harry should have stayed in America. It wasn't worth his coming, and it certainly wasn't worth us suffering his presence here. The statue is just awful. Okay, I keep saying that. I was wondering whether I should actually say something about it or leave things lie. After all, sometimes a criticism of a depiction is wrongly taken to be a criticism of the person depicted. And sometimes it is. Not in this case. In this case, the criticism is of the artist, or, I am sorry to say, of the two princes. One or the other had the decision on this, because the princes must have had input into it. I can't believe they just said to some random artist, okay, you do us a statue, do what you want, surprise us. So they must have seen preliminary sketches, and perhaps things look better in the preliminaries, I don't know. Whatever the backstory, someone, artist or princess, made a big mistake here. So this video was a bit delayed because it's taken me a while to work out why I think it is such a dreadful piece. And what struck me first and straight away was how very ordinary it is. So unimaginative. The word pedestrian just bounced into my mind. Now, Princess Di wasn't an intellectual, and she wasn't a very robust personality either. She was pushed into far more than she could handle, and she didn't handle it very well. But what she was an original. She's been compared, in my opinion, quite rightly, to Marilyn Monroe, because she too was a fragile personality who wasn't that cerebral, didn't have much of an intellectual or bookish inclination, although actually in the case of Monroe she actually did try. But what both these women did have was the ability, the talent to draw people's attention and then to use that attention to their advantage, or in Diana's case, to the advantage of some project that she wanted to support. In the case of Diana, she used that attention to great good. The landmine campaign and the AIDS campaigns, for instance. I mean, she went at a time when nobody, when people with AIDS were treated, worse than lepers. And she went into a hospice and embraced AIDS patients. That changed people's minds about AIDS all over the world. She was a tremendous force for good. And she was doing that simply on the strength of the way she managed to attract public attention and affection and sympathy. But all we have in that statue is an old-fashioned, bog-standard representation of, well, basically a housewife with a couple of kids. Now look, in the old days, statues were a way of remembering what people looked like. But we have photos nowadays. We know what Diana looked like, and she didn't look like that. And what I mean in saying that is that bone for bone, hair for hair, attitude for attitude, it's probably 100% technically accurate. I'm sure if you took a ruler to it and measured each part of physical proportion, it would be absolutely spot on. But there is, or should be, always something else in a depiction that tells you about the soul of the subject, and that statue just doesn't have that soul. It's just not there. Now, I'm going to show you a couple of pictures. This is a statue of a woman called St. Elizabeth Ann Seton. I don't know anything about her. The execution isn't that marvellous, but the statue itself shows something about her that's just a little more than the person. And then there's this, I think this is a wonderful statue of Mother Theodore Guerin, Saint Mother Theodore Guerin. Just look, she's showing the kids the heavens. I don't know whether she's talking about God or the stars. I don't know anything about that woman. But you can tell she is putting out there for the children. She is giving them something, a view of something. And this is just, as I said, it's a housewife shoving a couple of kids ahead of her. That's all. And looking a bit grim about it as well. Look, the reason it doesn't really look like her isn't because it doesn't look like her. It's because it does look like her. She had something else about her, and it was that something else that the sculptor simply hasn't caught. Now, that statue is a perfectly technically good depiction. You know, as I say, proportions are all right, the multi-ethnic children, you know, everything all what's right on, everything perfect. And that's the problem, because Diana wasn't perfect. I was put in mind of a poem by Robert Browning called Andrea del Sarto, and it was about an artist called Andrea del Sarto who was known as the perfect draftsman. His paintings were all technically absolutely spot on, but for some reason his paintings lacked some sort of spark, and the poem was a monologue. He was talking to his wife, who didn't like him that much, actually, and he's talking about how he can't get things in that way, even though he can draw them perfectly. And this is just a few lines from his poem. Somebody remarks, Morello's outline there is wrongly traced, his hue mistaken. What of that? Or else rightly traced and well ordered, what of that? Speak as they please, what does the mountain care? Ah, but a man's reach should exceed his grasp, or what's the heaven for? All is silver grey, placid and perfect with my art. The worse. And that perfection there is exactly what Diana wasn't. Why not treat yourself or a favoured relative or friend to these magnificent examples of merch? The mugs and t-shirts come in the Graniopteryx design or Granbo with a firearm or the more deadly knitting needles. Go to www.graniopteryx.com and whatever platform you're watching this on, please click like, subscribe and share.